about to kick off. Deep breath, everyone. Here we go. Good morning, everybody at the official Witches Sabbat. We are here Saturday morning, at least for the Eastern time zone, and kicking things off with the artist breakfast. So I hope that all of you out there have a trusty beverage and are ready to immerse yourselves in day 2 of this creative experience. I have some of our amazing featured artists with me this morning to talk about the intersection of art and magic, how creativity works in their personal process, and who knows what else we will cover today in this time. So going to start off all. If you haven't recognized me, I'm Laura TEMPEST. I am one of the organizers. I am a visual artist as well as a dance performer and an author. I primarily work in mixed media, and it's been something that has been part of my life process pretty much going on 40 years. And I'm in Rhode Island this morning, so that's where things are going. Let's see, Matilda, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Matilda Katz. I'm an artist from Israel, speaking to you from Israel right now, where it's 4 p.m. I'm working on a series in graphite that I call Witch and Familiar. It's basically a series of drawings in graphite that's focusing on a witch and her familiar animal for each different drawing that I make. And it's a series that I'm working on for a long time already and will continue to work on for a long time to come. And it's influenced by the history and magic of my geographical area. Basically, that's the ancient Near East and its ecology and its mythology. And yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Excellent. Thank you. And so also a reminder for everyone, you can see everyone's artwork in the, when you go to the main page, go for the first Pick Your Poison on the left, and you'll see all of this art as well. So you can go back and reference that. We're going to go in our little clockwise circle here to Clinton. Say a little bit about yourself.
Hello, my name is Clinton Meister. Currently, I'm residing in Dearborn, Michigan. I'm from Philly, and so East Coast person, but yeah, I'm living in the Midwest now. And yeah, I've been practicing pagan, for 32 years now. So I've been involved in the pagan and witchcraft community for quite some time. I've been practicing and showing artwork. Well, my first show was in 2005, and primarily I get my inspiration from, it just depends, really. I think a lot of it, I do a lot of ritual meditation, and I kind of go in, I do a lot of I do a lot of work on the tarot. The tarot is probably one of my biggest inspirations. I love Pamela Coleman Smith and the symbolism she used in the work, and I to mess with it and see what inspiration I get from it. So I'll do a reading and then I'll go into it and just produce whatever. And also I get a lot of inspiration from birds and ancient Greek myth. And I'm a devotee of Hecate and Hermes. So I do a lot of messaging there. And so I love the chthonic gods and the inspiration they kind of bring. So a lot of my work is darker in color, not necessarily in subject. So it just depends. I kind of flip-flop all over the place. I don't necessarily pigeonhole myself in just pagan-inspired artwork. I also do a lot of, the themes are there, but I'll do really silly cartoons too and have a strange theme to it. And I also like dance a lot too, and expression with art. I used to work with Martha Graham Dancer with a friend of mine, and she used to help inspire me to do dance and ritual. So I love all that stuff. So I don't know what else to say. So right now I'm working on a series based on the tarot, and I have a show coming in February, which is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be about auguries and birds and mental health. So it should be interesting to tie the two together.
That sounds exciting.
We'll see.
We can see that. All right, Arcana, or however you prefer us to call you this morning.
Hello. Hi, I'm Aidan Swan. I'm an artist living and working in Cape Town in South Africa. I I've been practicing for pretty much my whole life, and I work predominantly with wildlife in dream imagery. My current project is a full tarot deck, so I have quite a bit in common with Clinton. Birds are also a huge part of my spirituality, and they pop up in like all of my work. The other part of my life is I work in the film industry making weird props, which are often also occult based, such as the grimoire for the watch. So that's a little bit of me.
Excellent. All right, and Sarah.
Hi, my name is Sarah McMenemy, and I am from the Pacific Northwest. I am a Hecatean hedge witch, and I've been practicing for about 10 years. This summer, I kickstarted and published my tarot deck, the Entanglement Tarot, with Natalie Maracki of Laughing Cat Publishing. She kind of helped me because I couldn't do the whole process myself. But I work in both traditional and digital media, and I do digital illustration and I do acrylic paintings. I use a lot of natural themes and really inspired by sort of environmental concerns. And in my style, I'm really drawn towards kind of psychedelic and a little bit otherworldly kind of color schemes and styles.
Excellent. Well, again, so excited to have all of you here today. We have, again, from all over and different approaches and processes. And I'm hoping, because I know there's a lot of folks who joining in are like, well, I'm not an artist, and where does this work, for my magical practice? And well, first, I feel like art is integral to all of our lives, whether you are creating art or not. And what we're going to share today, I think, is applicable to all sorts of folks and to across the spectrum, whatever it is that you do to find that intersection. So I thought I've got some questions, but also see where things go this morning. But one of the things I often wonder for a lot of different artists is what came first for you? Was it for your artwork, or was it your spiritual path? Like finding that merger? Were you creating art first and then went into spirituality, or your spirituality or magic led you to art? Anybody?
I think my art came first. I was an artist from childhood, and I attended college for art, so I really developed my technique a lot before I started to find my own voice. But when I really got into witchcraft and the kind of spirituality that brought my spirit alive, I found my own voice to a great extent.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely art came first for me too. But I think it's just natural when you find, for them to coalesce, when you find a spiritual. I mean, every religion has beautiful artwork. I mean, I loved like Greek iconography in New Orthodox churches. They're gorgeous, and I can find inspiration there. And when I was a kid, I used to go to these places with a family, friends of the family, and I'd be like amazed at some of the artwork. And so I could even see that, and then as I got older and when I found my pagan path, it just kind of seemed to go naturally together. At first, for me, it was creative writing, really, and photography. And then I always drew, but I never took it as serious until I was a little bit older. And then when I was in my late teens, that's when I really started. Just all I could do was this kind of automatic drawing, and it was really, that's how it kind of became what it became. So yeah, but definitely art first, I would say.
Ethan?
For me, my spirituality actually brought me back to art. I had owned a clothing company for 18 years, which had failed for a couple of them. And I started getting prodded quite heavily by the weaver, who's one of my patrons. I got 85 spider bites in 5 years. And still no Spidey powers. I'm a bit pissed off about that. But anyway. But there were all of these prods over, you need to get back to painting because I had given it up 20 years prior. And eventually, when my clothing company failed completely, I was like, screw that, I'm going to paint. And suddenly everything that had gone wrong in my life started going right. And the more I started including my spirituality in my work, the better everything went. So now, I mean, I'm literally living my dream because I found a way to pull those two incredibly important aspects of myself together.
Mm.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks. Example of kind of listening to the universe, right? That push.
I love how the familiars are joining.
They can't bear to be left out. This is Luna, the other one's brother.
Oh, cool.
Racing stripes on his
Beautiful.
back.
Yeah, to me, I'm hesitant to say, but I think I've been drawing since, I don't know, maybe 3 years old. And I've been practicing art pretty much my entire life, nonstop. But I think like intuitively, I feel like saying that magic actually came first. Not formally, obviously, I wasn't practicing witch at 2 years old, but you know, just in terms of memories and visions and experiences that I remember from a very, very young age, magical experiences, for lack of a better term, and how they informed my life continuously and how they informed my art. So I think I would say the magic actually came first in some weird way.
Excellent. It is a bit of sometimes chicken and the egg, right? Of how these things flow into each other. And, you know, on one hand, we learn the art skills, right? The craft aspect of drawing, of painting, of photography, of weaving, of the things that we're physically doing, and then being able to filter that art, that spirit into it. But there's also how art in itself awakens our minds. Like I was thinking back to when I was young, like what I was doing was illustrating stories in my head. So I'm basically myth making in my head as I was going along. But it wasn't until like high school or college that I started thinking, you know, on the larger scale of myths outside of what's going on in my head, like expanding that conversation and then being like, okay, let's actually make this witchcraft. Like, how do I make this painting into a spell and working through that? And similar to Aiden, I did take a break from doing visual art in the way that is supposed to be like the major focus of my life. Because like, I'm going to do dance and I'm going to separate the witchcraft part of it because I didn't want to be the belly dancing witch. Like that was a thing. They're like, nah, I'm going to be sort of mythic, but it's going to be on the down low. And as I switched and just made this my focus, everything did become kind of smoother and flow much more easily. So, it's a journey, right? And it's continual exploration as well. So, do any of you have particular rituals or practices that you do when you sit down to make work that you'd like to share with folks?
Mhm.
Good.
Oh, yeah, a lot of time it depends on, well, if I have an idea for a series, I'll definitely work some intention before that. You know, I always like to kind of clear my head, or because, I don't know, my head's like a radio antenna and I get all kinds of signals. So, you know, I always like to make sure I can, you know, hyper focus on what I'm getting ready to put down from the ideas, especially if it's like a commission or something. That's even harder. I hate commissions. And I mean, we do them because we should and we have to sometimes, but I just, and you know, it's usually it's money, so that's always a good thing, you know, to make a little extra money and survive. But yeah, I have to hyper focus. So a lot of times I'll do a meditation. I do I don't know if you're familiar, you know, just a preset, you know, or like a psychic kind of prompt, you know, like what Matt Aron talks about, or even Christopher Panzak. You know, I always do a little prompting before, you know, I'll do a little meditation and grounding, and then after I set my attention, I see what symbols come, and then I just kind of go with it. That helps, you know. Sorry if that was rambling.
No, I think that made sense.
Okay.
Anybody else want to share a little bit their process? Sarah?
I'll sometimes do a little meditation or closed eye scrying, where I sort of cover my eyes and I'm just sitting and looking at what I see on the backs of my eyelids, and I'll think about what I want to create. And a lot of the time I'll get a literal vision of what it is I'm going to be doing with a piece of art from that.
Right.
Yeah, I'm going to steal an answer to that question that I heard a little while ago from an artist named Lucy Stein, who has an exhibition right now. I can't remember the name of the place, but she was interviewed, and someone in the audience asked the same question. And she said, the drawing is the ritual. And I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly that. Because there was a time that I was experimenting with that a little bit, like trying to have a pre-drawing session thing going. And while it felt very good and productive and conducive, even, I kind of felt anxious that I wanted to get it done already, because I wanted to start, making art. And I pretty quickly abandoned it, because I feel, like Lucy Stein said, that the actual drawing session is the ritual itself. Yeah, so that's where I'm at with this at the moment.
That's a great insight. Aiden, did you want to share anything about your process?
Well, I work with dream imagery. So my first step is to get a decent night's sleep, to speak to the spirits, to dream. They tell me what needs to be there. And often I'll go for a walk in the forest. Cape Town is beautiful. It's all forests and mountains. And I'm fortunate enough to be close enough to that outdoors that I'm like a 5-minute walk from Newlands Forest. So it's often go for a walk, calm down, and then sit and meditate and sketch out the basic ideas and take it from there. But the dreaming's the important thing.
So it made me think it's actually something that Sarah said. There's 2 points. One is the vision, right? Something that you see behind your eyes. And that's something I've always, like the mind's eye, like what am I visualizing within my head? But my partner has aphantasia. So that, and even though they are a very creative being, they work in music, and how their brain works is a different way. And it's kind of wondering, like, how many visual artists, have the vision in their mind's eye, or do you feel like it's something outside of the process? I mean, because there's no wrong or right answer. It's just our brains can work differently and still be creative and create amazing things. But it's kind of like, how does that work when, it's not how your brain works? You all.
For me, it's kind of weird. I mean, it's more outside of me. I very often work in a trance state, and it's what comes. I don't have a concrete idea at the beginning of it. So things will come as I work, and they'll compound one on top of the other. So it's not usually so much I start off with this specific idea. I mean, some things are like that, but my favorite way of working is the much looser method.
More cumulative in how it builds. Clinton, did you have something?
Oh, I was just thinking about the aphantasia, and I guess you can go. I guess it depends on what you want, and if you have an initial idea. Like I just got over a serious block for a month or two, and I was like, oh my goodness, I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I have a show in a couple of months, and I have nothing for it yet. So yeah, I started looking at my tarot and just kind of. I had an idea, so I was like, where should I start with this? And yeah, because sometimes you can't manifest that in your brain. You have to sometimes really look out into the mundane and see what you pull from that. And spirituality, that's perfect for that. That's why I love dreams. That's why I love the cards. And it's funny, so this morning I was doing a card, I was like, I have an idea, and then the Page of Cups came up, of course, so I had these crazy dreams last night and the past few. So it's like, I jot them down in notes so I can look over these notes and see if I can find a connecting kind of thread. And I can pull inspiration from there. Dreams are an amazing tool for, an artist, if we can tap into them, but yeah, it's a lot of times that's where they start for me too. It's that weird landscape in our brain.
Theater of the mind.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. So I was just, I think that's a lot of folks run into that in magical practice too, right? Where they say they can't visualize. Their meditation is hard because of that, the different, like especially trance meditations. Like we're often thinking about it so hard that, they think there's only one way to achieve trance or to achieve that sort of vision. And then if they can't, they're not going to be as a successful magical practitioner. And it's like, there are many roads, just as there are many gods, many spirits, and many media to explore. So just because your brain doesn't work in one way, that it has another amazing way that other people can't even perceive, which is awesome. So like there's no cookie cutters here. we're free-form bread. It's all for sort of that.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I mean, to me, because my process is incredibly slow. Like I work many hours on one piece, and it's all very kind of methodical and a lot of constructing processes going on. So it's very difficult for me to get into into this kind of a flowing state of I wish I could, but that's not how my art works. Of getting into this flowing state of creating through visionary or journeying state or whatever. But my inspirations and ideas and sources, they do come from, I don't know, from some sort of another place, but they don't necessarily happen within a ritualistic process or time space of ritual. So when they do occur, I just make sure I record them in a sketch form, whatever, and then it just has to wait for its time.
And I think the second point that was what you said earlier, that the quote about drawing is the ritual, right? It is the process itself. And we often get caught up into the stuff, right? We have to have all the stuff and all the things and everything set out. For folks like doing spells, I need to have this oil and this candle at this hour at this time. It's like, sometimes you're just going to start doing the thing. And like the sigil crafting method that I teach, people are like, how do you charge a sigil? Like the time that you spend thinking about it, the time that you're putting it together, and the actual time that you're drawing it is the magic. And if you do the last step, which is to apply or acknowledge it, that's just for our human physical existence of like, I want to do the things. I want to set some shit on fire, right? It's like, it's that extra kind of happy thing. But the art and the magic happens in the process of it. So kind of giving that out to our folks, which gets us into the thing about a lot of people ask me about, is the art itself magic? Like a particular painting, a work, a drawing, a dance, all these different things. Like, do we consider it itself a piece of magic or a spell, or is it the process, or is it something other that happens in the viewing of it? What do you all think about that?
I think all of the above. I mean, beautiful act of creation. You have this whole process. You take inspiration out of the ether or wherever you get it from, and you use your magical tools, your brush, your pen, your graphite, whatever it is, your computer, and you start working in your palette or your canvas. That's your sacred space. So all these things combined. I don't know if you can see my area where I do work is right next to my shrines, and I have shrines all over the house, but this whole area is set up in this parlor in a certain way. So when we're doing work, we're taking in inspiration, and that veil is just a little thinner, and I think the whole act is magical. And then you have it up on you put it up on the wall or wherever you put it out there, and it becomes a community integrated like event. People, even if they're just looking at it, they're getting inspired. That's magical. That's magical just to see this work, whatever kind of emotion it evokes. I think Storm was talking about that last night. It doesn't matter. That's a magical act. Anything that evokes that emotion. It's a beautiful process. I think it's magical from beginning to the very end. And it's like you're creating this tulpa or this energy. It's like, this very being. And sometimes they take such a life of their own. Anyway, I'll shut up.
That's great.
I think the whole process is magical. I mean, the product can be magical depending on what you're making. Certainly with the entanglement tarot, I was actually making a ritual object meant to be used to create magic, because that's the focus of my particular deck. So I hope people will use it as a ritual tool to make their own magic, but making it was also an act of magic for me. And now the item itself, I think is magical.
Definitely. It's the acquisition of the interaction there that happens. Any other? So with that too, kind of, especially with the reproduction of a deck, right? It runs into this interesting thing of you creating, a print form of something that is original, even if it's just created, not just created digitally, but when it's like existing within the machine, right? And it goes out into the world. I'm fascinated by the process of like, they can create a deck, and then it still has like in that reproductive mode as it's mass produced around the world, or even a small edition, but like when you've got thousands of something and it still has that power to it. And I run across so many folks who are like, oh, well, I only want the original of this. I'm like, the original piece might not, it has a power into itself because like, as an artist, I've touched it, but the print is still the image, right? There's still something there. And it's weird that what we have about what is the original piece of art versus the copies of it, right? But especially for magical tools, for oracle decks, tarots, things like that, clothing, and things that are worn, we have this, the ritual of wearing or interacting with them is another magical process. So curious about what you think about, the print format. Like, how do you feel about making multiples of your work and how that interacts with other people?
Yeah, this is actually fun, a little bit funny to me because when I was in my younger days, I used to have this thing where I felt really weird about the idea of original art and museums where they kind of hog all the precious things, and a lot of people don't even have access to that. And I used to be a great proponent of, printing and mass distributing things generally, and art included. Today, I feel different about this whole thing, but I do think, and in relation to your previous question, and like Clinton said, I think the whole thing is magic. The product, the process, the viewing, the creation, the origin point, and it doesn't necessarily matter if it's in its original form or in a print form. The intention is encoded in there, and it's there. It's just the magical object. Yeah, the magical process is alive there.
Right. And we had lost you for a minute. If you had
Yeah. I'm back. Sorry, we've got power difficulties here. In South Africa, we have what is called load shedding, where the government basically cuts off your power for a couple of hours every day. So I do apologize if I disappear. I will come back on a new means. I agree with what everybody else has said thus far. I do totally agree that it doesn't matter whether it's a print or an original. It is just as magical, and that it can. Sorry, that the process as well as the final item is magical if you intend it to. A lot of my work is intended as a spell. I've got one particular piece which I've sold many, many prints of, which is basically a spell to help anxiety. And it's asemic writing, which is basically writing which isn't writing. You can read whatever you want into it, with an illustration of a snake, which is Ansomnes, the snake who sits in the belly. And it's a spell to calm Ansomnes, and you create your own ritual around it. So it is, the intent I put into it is to help people, or they can use it in any way they choose, be that just as a pretty thing to put on the wall or as a spell themselves, which they can create.
Take a look at that piece. I think a lot of folks will want to see that one.
It's one of my favorites.
I'm like, oh, I'm all about the serpent and the snake in the belly. And I think that also gets into another aspect of that too, is, when we're creating something, we have our vision, our connection perhaps in mind, and maybe we have a message, but sometimes we don't, right? Sometimes it's about just making that art and telling that story to ourselves. And some folks are like, oh, when I see this piece, it reminds me of this goddess, even though you say it's this one. Is that wrong? Is that bad? I've gotten to the point for me personally, where I release it out into the world, and how you see it, that becomes your interpretation. So maybe when I was younger, I'd be more upset about like, oh, what did I do wrong? But there is, that's like the thing of when you release your art into the world, what happens beyond that? Like, and how do you feel about possible interpretations, misinterpretations, or how it's used? So anybody on that?
It's hard. I think, yeah, I agree. When I was younger, I wanted to have this control over other people's emotions and how they're going to react to your work. Like, no, it's not this, it's this. But true, you have no control over what someone else is going to think about it. So I try to just kind of let it go once it's like out there. If it's on the wall, I don't know. If people want to ask me questions about it, they can. And if they want to, I'm open to whatever people say, like what they think it is. That's fine. I always like to think that I try to convey a very distinct message, but sometimes I like to hide or mix it up a little bit. It depends on what it is, I suppose. I love seeing what people pull from it, and what does it do, so it is hard sometimes when you have, especially I'm a Capricorn. I want to get very structured and kind of in certain ways, as much as I like to say I'm not. And I like to have control over what I'm doing. So yeah, it can be difficult sometimes.
I think it's awesome. I absolutely love hearing people's different interpretations of my work. I often get people inboxing me saying, oh, they saw this and to them it feels like this, it invokes this memory in them. And I think that's absolutely wonderful. Even if they hate it, that's great. It's bringing something up. And what my reason for doing it is my reason, and that's within me. And whatever they get out of it, that is just as important and just as powerful as my choice. So I absolutely love that everybody's different.
Many ways of the mind, Sarah?
I think that as artists, we perform a series of transmutations, basically. I mean, we take inspiration, we apply craft, and we turn our inspiration into art. And then when we publish or when we put that art out into the world, we commit another transmutation, which is to make it public, to take it outside of ourselves and put it everywhere. And the act of viewing it is also a transmutation, because the viewer will project their own interpretation onto it. And so the way that they receive it in the end is going to be filtered through that lens. Like Clinton, I would say, years ago, I definitely would have tried to control that a lot more. But now, like with the Entanglement Tarot, I actually designed the deck to be a little bit more abstract and be something that people could project themselves onto on purpose, and be something that they would really be able to interact with and make their own. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's a great thing.
That room for interpretation, to open up to another level. All right, Matilda, did you want to share anything about that, or?
I'm not sure. I think, it's pretty much what everyone said pretty much reflects how I feel about this.
Okay. Yeah, it's this fascinating thing. And I think especially, I think we could, if we polled, I wonder how much of, like, for us who were younger and frustrated about it, also went to art school. Because I can think about the critique process, right? Where you're like, what is the message that you're trying to get across? And putting this element here and this here, it's not really, getting the message, like which is important for advancing our craft of it, but not necessarily the message and the experience, right? So, people have been on these different panels, or like, should you go to art school or should you not? And like, yes, no, maybe. It's like what you take from it is like what you go through any type of schooling, and whether you're doing it by self-taught, which is an amazing way of going about it. But even like in self-taught, we're still absorbing things from the world. So it's just a matter of what structure or lack of structure, or semi-structure that we have. But it's funny, like the things that we pick up and then internalize and then we'll have to release. To let it go. And for our folks who don't consider themselves artists who are watching, I kind of think about that in your magical process too. When you're creating, that you're not, it's like we learn as young magical practitioners or newbies to a path that, like, this is how it's done. And this is how it should always look like. And like, once you release, they're like, well, that's one way of doing it. Now, what's the next step? And what does that mean? And leaving yourself room for interpretation suddenly allows more power to that. So just kind of putting that into the world there, right? Of, you might not even know what the message is when you're making your art too. Like, you either have that precise message or the, just going to see what happens when you start drawing it. So how are we doing? Oh, we've got about 5 more minutes. And let's see, I'm just going to check on there what we have in the chat. Folks are enjoying it. That's excellent. Thank you all for listening in. So do you have any advice for other artists seeking to do magic, or for magical practitioners looking to explore art? So what would you suggest to other folks?
Just keep practicing. I mean, it depends. If you want to get into art, I would just say pick up a pencil or a brush or whatever you feel comfortable doing. See what works for you, like what feels comfortable for you, and just go with it. And just enjoy the process. For me, I mean, that's what. I never went to art school either. I just been doing it since I was a kid, and it always felt good. And I didn't really think about any consequences of it. I just enjoyed it. So, and same thing with magic.
Letting it flow. Do the thing, let it flow, have a daily practice.
Exactly.
I think one of the beautiful things about witchcraft is just that you can experiment so much. It's such an open area. And I would say the same thing about doing art that's magical. Just experiment with, materials that you might not otherwise use. Like, there's a whole bunch of inks you can make out of nightshades and other herbals, and all sorts of materials that you can make magically, and different ways to deal with magical themes. So just keep yourself open to that, and don't try to box yourself into one thing right away.
Definitely explore the things, but also for some folks who get creative, make sure if you're mixing different herbs that you're wearing gloves and also ventilation.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, definitely that. I make a lot of my own inks, and some of them are out of things that are rather toxic, like the Amanita muscaria mushroom and various other things. So yeah, be careful. But my advice to other artists would be to go with your gut, do what feels right to you, ignore what anybody else says. I mean, obviously, constructive criticism is one thing, but don't try and be anyone else. Your art is you, and you are your art, and you need to be true to that. Don't try and do this theme or that subject or that style because that's popular or that's what so and so says you should do. Just do it and love it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's also pretty useful to look at other artists who are making magical or esoteric art. Not as a reference for creating your work, but just to get inspired into how that connection is made between, this realm and the other realm through art. I think it's a very inspiring kind of avenue to draw from.
That's all. Fantastic advice. I realize that we don't exist in a vacuum, that we, to see inspiration and technique and to study, it's like, so, for when I go to museum, I'm often drawn to looking at like the how of it and the studying of, if something's draws me to it, even if it's a medieval religious icon, like I'm not connecting to this picture of Jesus or Mary, but the way that the colors have become vibrant or the structure of it, and that we can revel in things that even if it's not precisely aligned for what we're doing, that we can still glean information. There's that little, because we're sort of like amoebas, to sort of absorb these different processes. And yeah, to really going back to Aiden said about following our gut and Sarah said experimenting, like all of these things in the daily practice. It's not just one thing, it's a lot of different things that we can do. So, all right, how are we doing on? Oh, we have reached our time. So thank you all for joining us. Now, for the folks who are just coming into the chat this morning and just waking up, you can see the work of all of these artists in the website, the gallery. It's the first one on the left when you go to the Pick Your Poison to see that. And I think also in the YouTube, Kyle has dropped the URL if you want to get directly there. So please explore their websites, follow them on the Instagram, on the social media. And I think everybody has, if they have prints or different things available, something where you can, if you'd like to acquire their art, their decks, their creations, and to follow them. That's an important thing. It's even if you're like, well, I can't afford art right now, you can still appreciate it. We love, artists love having our work shared, and other people getting to see and experiencing that is also really important. So you have any quick last things anybody wants to say?
Thank you for hosting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It was fun.
Well, thank you all. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the event, and hopefully this has set the tone for the rest of our weekend as well, to continue to explore this where art and magic intersect. So everyone, freshen up your beverages and take a snack, and we will see you shortly in about 10-15 minutes for our first panel, or excuse me, our first workshop of the day. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Historically, the distinction between different kinds of witches, white and black, good and bad, has always been important.
First of all, there were the village wizards, the wise men, cunning women, healers, charmers, fortune tellers, who performed services for their clients, often for a fee, who helped them and were therefore, on the whole, rather popular in the villages and were regarded as white witches, and indeed often used some of the church's prayers as part of their ritual.
These survive in country districts to this day. Theo Brown, a research fellow in British folklore, prefers to call them charmers.
From Minehead down to Bodmin Moor, I've known about 17 charmers. It may be purely coincidental, they're nearly all men. They don't like reporters or anything like that. They usually talk very freely to me, surprisingly so. In fact, on one occasion, I went to see a charmer. I was a complete stranger to him. He invited me into his house, sat me down in his parlour, looked at me very hard, and said, "You can do it, can't you?"
William Painter is a Cornish bard, and his bardic name means searcher out of witchcraft.
Quite recently I gave a talk to some 60 children on Cornish folklore at the Liscard Secondary Modern School. And at the end of my talk, during the discussion and questions, I was amazed when 4 children, each in turn, one said, "My grandfather can charm warts. My grandfather can charm ringworms in cattle. My grandfather can stop the flow of blood when anyone's badly cut." And the 4th, "My grandfather can charm snakes."
I don't know exactly the procedure, except that they make a circle round the snake with an ash stick. And because of the formula of words they use, apparently, the snake cannot leave the circle. In fact, a man I met who has seen this done said the snake lashes round and round inside this invisible circle, is quite unable to break out of it.
Again, at one period, there was a great demand for charms in bags. And here is a charm I discovered in Cornwall, hanging over a mantelpiece. It is a charm against all terrors by night. It contains the wings of a bat.
The second category is black witchcraft.
The type, I suppose, we think of when a witch is mentioned, was the person who was suspected of having done harm to her neighbours by some supernatural means. The witch usually lived in the same village, and the most usual situation, I suppose, was that she'd come to the door to borrow some food or drink, or even to beg some money for some neighbour, to ask for some neighbourly help, and the neighbour had simply slammed the door in her face. A few days later, something goes wrong in the household, a child is taken ill, somebody dies, the pigs are sick, and they turn around and blame the witch.
I think in the old days, people very often did put a curse on someone that worked, because you see, people were very much wronged, perhaps by, say, the local squire turned them out of their home and they had no redress at law or something like that. No human law could do anything for them. And when a person was really wronged and cursed someone from the marrow of their bones, believing in every word of it, then that sort of curse with justice behind it did work.
Nor are maleficent witches unknown today.
I recently heard of a grey witch who blighted a neighbour's cattle over the hill, and a bishop went and remonstrated with her about this. He asked her, "Are you responsible for this?" And she said, "Oh yes," openly boasted about this.
People often had their cattle ill-wished, bewitched, overlooked, and they were told to take the heart of the animal that had met with a mysterious end, pierce it with nails and pins and horseshoe nails, and put it